is like, what competent is like,
Yep.
and really how to shine.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so I just want to just ask that, not just a follow-up question, really. What are the specific strategies or practices you have found effective in building, I would say, resiliency within your team or within the organization? So more than you this time, if
Yeah. So, building that resiliency within the organization or within my team, it's about not only understanding your own leadership and communication styles, but it's about, being able to look at each individual contributor on your team, or each manager on your team, and understand their motivations, their learning styles, and adapt your teaching styles or your mentorship styles to kind of meet their needs, as opposed to expecting them to adapt to you.
yes.
And so, that when you meet people kind of on their terms, they're more likely to respond. They're more likely to find that motivation to achieve and to perform above expectations in their role, and to develop that resiliency, like keep showing up, and to speak up and to have an opinion, and be comfortable presenting that opinion, or providing an alternate opinion to what I may say the company needs or the group needs. And then that's applying it. You take that and you also apply that to your peers, your executive team, and how you work. So it's taking that understanding of what people's motivations and styles are. And I'm not saying you adapt to everyone. Like, you still need to remain kind of who you are authentically, but like having that perspective of
Mhm.
I may need to adapt my style in order to be effective, and have my voice heard in this room.
Absolutely right. And the only way,
Understanding your audience.
yes, and the only way you can do that is when you really understand that it's not about you as a leader,
Yeah.
it's the needs of others. So
Yeah.
you're, you know, being sensitive to that. At the
Yep.
same time, you're keeping, streamlined as possible, your positions, so that there will be no, biases or
Yes.
one person's thought processes really
Yep.
skewing, how you do run your business unit. And
Yep.
so, just being fair and objective. So that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so how important, if you can just venture off into emotional intelligence, which is really connected to resilience in so many ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how important do you consider emotional intelligence in your role as a chief financial officer in uh, the energy sector?
Very. I mean, you have to have that emotional intelligence when you're managing any type of team. Um, I've worked a number of roles, basically coming through, growing up in investment banking, where there's really this, work 100 plus hours a week mentality. I don't want to say there's a, dismissiveness of self-care, and I really dislike the term work-life balance because I don't think it actually exists.
We're talking about that this week at the panel. That's
You always have to be making choices. Like, there's never this, anyway, but so you if you want your team to perform above kind of what you expect them to do in their normal roles, you have to have a certain level of emotional intelligence to understand where they're coming from, and kind of what motivates them, and what are their other priorities in life. And so how do you set them up for success, based on understanding those parameters. And you can't do that without having a certain level of emotional intelligence. It can't just be, give me this project deliverable by X date. You have to understand the whole person. And you can't do that without,
yeah.
a high level of emotional intelligence.
That is a key ingredient of being a compassionate as
Yeah,
well as a high performing leader, right? High
yeah,
performing. And so, which is very much connected to being a resilient leader,
yes.
all encompassing.
Correct.
So I would
Correct.
say that's a phenomenal job in terms of really understanding the position of the person you're asking a deliverable of, right? And then when people notice that you're considering them
Yeah,
in your decision making or in terms of, meeting deadlines and so forth, they tend to give more of themselves
exactly.
because
Yep,
of the empathy factor.
I do. Yep.
So it's a beautiful thing because I mean it's not only about identifying, understanding your emotions as a leader, but understanding and identifying and regulating your emotions, mind you. That's
Yeah.
key. Identifying and understanding the emotions of others, and so
Yeah.
that you say win friends and influence, like the book.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You can't do that otherwise. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm really happy. It's a big deal. This is a big deal for me. A huge
And
compliment in leadership.
yeah.
When you're
One of the, oh,
able-
sorry.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was gonna say one of the biggest lessons I learned in terms of leadership, kind of where I am today is actually in investment banking, you work on deal teams where, you work for a particular MD or director. But when you're actually affecting a transaction, especially when you're at the associate or the VP level, you're working with a number of different deal teams who all have different reporting structures. So, your product group reports to a different MD, and so you really have to find common ground across the team in order to make sure that like the project is moving forward. When you don't have that direct like hierarchical relationship to say, okay, if you don't do this, if you don't give me this deliverable by X date, there's I can enforce consequences. It's you have to generate buy-in, across the organization. And I think a lot of people tend to rely on reporting structures for that buy-in, and you're not going to be effective as a leader if that's how you're relying on getting things done. You really need to be able to foster relationships across the organization and foster that teamwork.
Yes, and to me, how I see that is that then you're operating at a tactical level as a leader. You're not
Yes.
strategic, and being an executive or high level senior leader calls for strategy. And
Yeah.
strategy means knowing how to, engage and get something from a party or a team member
Yep.
without having to, have that hierarchy chain or
Right.
something for people. That's just not going to work. And then you don't get respect that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
so I 100%
Yeah.
agree with that. And then, of course, what specific skills or competencies, if you just had to name them, related to emotional intelligence, do you believe are crucial for success at the executive level? I mean, I guess
Uh,
besides active listening, are there any?
Yes, I mean we've talked about quite a few of these, and it all kind of comes down to that like um, adaptability, curiosity, um, willingness to take risks. I guess these aren't necessary. I guess some of these are skill sets. Some of these are personality traits that I'm listing. Um, but yeah, that compassion, understanding, um, those all kind of come together into that emotional resiliency
Yes.
umbrella,
Yes.
I
So
would
I
think.
just want to add one thing in terms of being able to sense or feel the room, right?
Yeah,
It's being able to read those
yeah,
nonverbal cues. That's important.
exactly.
The body language, even to the shoulders and your face and everything.
Yeah, yes.
Dictate the outcome you're gonna get from the other party.
Oh, exactly. Oh, way more than like the words that you say most of the time.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's one of the reasons why, because of the resilience workshops that I do, we focus a lot on resilience. But I said the emotional intelligence piece, navigating difficult conversations and introducing people how to really read nonverbal cues is very, very, very
Yeah.
helpful.
Oh, yes.
And so, what have you personally engaged in any training or development programs to enhance your emotional intelligence? And if so, what specific training program has really influenced your leadership style the most?
Um, I can't say that I've taken any particular trainings for it. I've had various corporate trainings on leadership, I think throughout business school and post business school life, but I don't recall doing any that are particularly related to developing your emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
Um, I can say that, I've had a number of roles. I shouldn't say number. I've had a very recent role where I had to be the one to have very hard conversations on an almost daily basis. Um, and taking that approach of, sticking to facts, trying to take emotion out of the conversations, um, and then, reflecting, doing a bit of self-reflecting on, how I approach that situation, um, has been, probably the best training that you could have in developing that emotional resiliency and that willingness to like show up again the next day, knowing that you're going to have another hard conversation. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
I would say it's more on the job training that I've had versus um, training sessions in developing resiliency and emotional intelligence.
absolutely right. So you learn to become a compassionate leader through on the
Yeah.
job experience.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Pay attention. The signs are all there. All
Yep.
you have to do is just to just listening and emotional processing. Like I've always led with this. Lots of times we as leaders, particularly in the corporate framework, we put emotional processing at the back burner.
Yep.
We put all the hard metrics, delivery, technical performance and everything,
Yes.
budget and numbers ahead of that. But
Yep.
the delicate dance, it's a balance, right?
It is.
Between the two. And so that you can actually show up as a leader you would like to show up as.
Yep.
So, but I do believe the training, I'm sure you can agree that training in this particular area on compassion leadership or emotional
Yeah.
intelligence is absolutely
Is
necessary.
yes.
So I'm from high tech. I'm from high tech, and that's missing there too. So,
Yep. Yes. And
yeah,
it's not just at the executive level, but it's at all levels.
of
So
course, absolutely, yeah, it's missing everywhere. But in terms of let's move on to navigating difficult conversations because you took us there.
okay.
In your experience, what types of difficult conversations often arise in your role as a C-suite executive? And so, what have you done to really navigate those challenging conversations and really maintain positive relationships and achieve desired outcomes? I know it's a long question, but
Yeah. So, I have to say, sitting in a CFO role, I can't provide a lot of detail around,
of course,
difficult conversations that I've had to have,
yeah,
but in broad strokes, you can probably guess that a lot of those conversations or difficult conversations have to do with the financial position of the company and what is being communicated to external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. And so, in order to facilitate those discussions, from a financial perspective, like you have to stick with the facts, and you have to base your conversation in solid, tangible facts, and you really do have to take the emotion out of it. As hard as it is, because you're in situations, people are passionate about, the ways capital should be spent or not spent. And you really have to take a very objective approach to that. And then you also need to just have the confidence um, in the basis of your facts. And so the nice thing about numbers is that they're numbers. and they don't lie. So
Don't lie.
math is math. So, I do have that benefit, but I think, some of the conversations I've had to have is, you really have to, you have to take your personality out of it, and focus on making sure that, the facts are accurately represented to
Yeah,
all.
and yeah, and what